Hello, welcome back to the Art Channel with Joshua White and Grace Adam. This week we are reviewing an exhibition at the Barbican Art Gallery by an Icelandic artist called Ragnar Kjartansson.
We're looking at The Visitors, which was made in 2012, and I think it's really the highlight of this exhibition. It's a very impressive work made in an old house in New York State, so it's got this sort of very strong Victorian and historical feel in all of the detail. And there are 9 musicians and singers performing in different rooms, and they're all cued in at the beginning. So you get this very complex, rich and lyrical sound. It endures for over 1 hour. So it's got that improvised quality.
I think it plays into his interest in the idea of duration of time spent of watching a piece being made. I mean, as the musicians come in, you see them set up, there's 5 or 10 minutes before they start playing. At the end of the performance, you see them sort of wind down and leave the room, switch off monitors. So in that way, of course, it's artifice, it's pretense, but you sort of see the whole process, and for me that makes it quite an honest piece of work.
It has the feeling of a lamentation, of a romantic song where the heart, is exposed. There's this rawness. It's about loss and longing. He quotes his wife's poetry, especially this line, "I fall again into my feminine ways." And this work was made shortly after his divorce from the wife, who's a poet that he quotes in the film. So there's clearly an autobiographical dimension to the work.
And I think because it's such a complex thing to set up, I mean, he's in charge, but it's a huge collaboration, people who own the house, his fellow musicians, the filming. You get drawn into the fact that I think he is being quite straightforward, quite honest. It's so complex, they're so reliant on each other. That's really something quite charming, quite engaging.
Ultimately, I think it's a very seductive piece of filmmaking. He understands that music can really touch the heart. It's made like a music video, and you're left drawn in and seduced by this love song, really. I think it is, undeniably.
And I think, yeah, you're right. Just to say that it is a very well produced music video with a very good piece of music, and it's a sweeping kind of piece of music. It stays in your head, and he's using a language that his visitors understand completely. So you click right into it. This is the end, painted in 2012 for the Venice Biennale. The artist represented Iceland. So he produced 144 paintings, one a day, very close proximity with the model. They lived and worked together in this amazing palace on the Grand Canal. And this installation is the result of that claustrophobic, daily, repetitive process.
It plays on that tradition of the artist working with the model, building up that intensity, using that scrutiny, observing psychological detail on the surface and skin of the body. But there's something playful here too, rather satirical. He's living the life of the bohemian artist in the studio with the model. You can see the residue of this rather claustrophobic life together with the bottles and the cigs and the musical instruments. But he's playing with it, he's satirizing it at the same time, isn't he? And they're not entirely flattering to the model. There's a sense in which Kjartansson is poking fun at his friend, effectively, sort of observing all of these sort of little quirks of his character, but as it were, capturing them on these sketchy canvases that operate rather like an entire installation. They're not meant to be seen individually, are they?
This is not rich Venetian painting, is it?
No.
These are kind of good, bad paintings, and it's always slightly problematic. How much is the tradition being laughed at, used, looked at from the side? So they are individually not so powerful as a kind of process, as a record of somebody painting a model for 144 days. It's quite powerful.
So it becomes quite performative in that way in which he embraces endurance and fortitude and discipline.
This This is God, made in 2007, and it's a very, in some ways, very straightforward video of the artist singing in front of this orchestra, kind of Hollywood style, this repeated mantra, sorrow conquers happiness.
Well, it displays his interest in this sort of concept of Weltschmerz, which means literally world sadness. And it's a notion of disappointment in life, this sort of romantic tradition of the mismatch between idealism and aspiration on the one hand, and on the other, sort of constant disappointment and sadness. And so it's really like a dirge, isn't it? It's something quite kind of mythic about it, but he presents it almost like a sort of Hollywood musical of the 1930s.
It's really interesting because actually I'm completely seduced by it. Pink satin, an orchestra, you know, a man in a dinner jacket with a bow tie, and not looking at all sad while he's singing. It's not gloomy in any way. So it's very odd. It's a very clever mixture.
It lulls you into this sort of almost like trance. It becomes a mantra, repeating over and over again to this orchestral sound that's very rich. And, you know, we have to ask inevitably, you know, what is he trying to say? Well, it relates to the power of music, to song as catharsis and release, that we console ourselves with expression, quite literally.
Yeah. And I think it's very successful because it's a very straightforward, in some ways it's a simple piece of work. You engage with this man singing, you ask the questions we've been talking about, but you are seduced by his beautiful voice, the beautiful arrangement, and again the visuals I'm very familiar with. This is an afternoon movie from Hollywood.
And it's staged like an old cinema with this pink satin that mimics the satin on the set in the film. It's a very mesmerizing work, and you could imagine spending half an hour with it, which is his intention. This work is called Take Me by the Dishwasher, dated to 2014, and it's a live performance piece, unlike all the other work in the exhibition. So through the day, while the exhibition is open, these 10 troubadours are singing a really banal script from a film that starred his parents in this erotic scenario. So it's an ironic comment really on romance and sexuality, but also on bohemia, the sort of language of music, of longing, of love, and he makes reference to it with these empty beer bottles on the floor.
The beer bottles, as you say, are quite art school, quite boho, and they are consumed through the day. These guys can go to the fridge, and they are all men, 10 young men, can go to the fridge, get out a beer, and carry on singing. And I think there is a weird mismatch, as you say, between people lying around on sofas and mattresses and playing guitars, and this quite conventional piece of film in a way, very late 1970s, this kind of housewife fantasy, and actually the subtext or the subtitle for the piece is Memorial to a Marriage. And when you know that, it's perhaps less irony and more sadness.
Well, the irony is very strongly embedded in this piece, and that's consistent with much of his work in the exhibition. It also employs performance, duration, endurance, and of course this interaction between the viewer and the performance. We can wander through it, we can watch them sing and play their music and feel enclosed by this scenario, by this ambiance of Bohemia.
But it's very odd, isn't it? Because you don't talk to the musicians, you don't sit down beside them, so there's still a barrier, it's still a performance which you can sort of be part of but not part of. It's very cleverly set up. It's quite awkward for a viewer to come in and decide how to negotiate it.
Thank you for watching the Art Channel. If you've enjoyed this film, please give it a thumbs up. You can also subscribe to the channel, and you can also follow us on social media on Twitter and Instagram.